Chapter 5. Able Seamen. Grades of seafaring persons. Able seamen, ordinary seamen, boys, shipping and rating, overrating, requisites of an able seaman, hand, reef, and steer, work upon rigging, sail-making, day's work, working ship, reefing and furling, watch duty, coasters and small vessels. Seafaring persons before the mast are divided into three classes: able seamen, ordinary seamen, and boys or green hands. And it may be remarked here that all green hands in the merchant service are termed boys, and rated as such, whatever may be their age or size. In the United States Navy, an able seaman receives $12 per month, an ordinary seaman $10, and the boys or green hands from $4 to $8, according to their strength and experience. Footnote. The wages of seamen in the Royal Navy are, for able seamen, 36 shillings, ordinary 26 shillings, and landmen 23 shillings per month. Boys of the first class, stout lads of 18 and upwards, who have been 2 or 3 years at sea, have 14 shillings 3 pence, and boys of the second class 12 shillings 9 pence per month. But the month being calculated by lunar, not calendar time, gives 13 months' wages in the year. In the merchant service, the wages of seamen differs in the various trades, but the average of able seamen's wages in merchant ships may be taken at present at 50 shillings per calendar month, or £30, while the wages of the able seaman in the Queen's fleet is £23 8 shillings per annum. In the latter, however, the term is not broken into intervals, caused by the duration of voyages, and all things considered, the seaman earns as much in the year in the Navy as in the merchant service. In the merchant service, wages are about the same on long voyages, but on voyages to Europe, the West Indies, and the southern ports, they are considerably higher and very fluctuating. Still, the same proportion between the classes is preserved, an ordinary seaman getting about $2 less than an able seaman, and the boys from nothing up to $2 less than ordinary seamen, according to circumstances. A full-grown man must ship for boys' wages upon his first voyage. It is not unusual to see a man receiving boys' wages and rated as a boy, who is older and larger than many of the able seamen. The crews are not rated by the officers after they get to sea, but, both in the merchant service and in the Navy, each man rates himself when he ships. The shipping articles in the merchant service are prepared for so many of each class, and a man puts his name down and contracts for the wages and duties of a seaman, ordinary seaman, or boy, at his pleasure. Notwithstanding this license, there are very few instances of its being abused, for every man knows that if he is found incompetent to perform the duty he contracts for, his wages can not only be reduced to the grade for which he is fitted, but that something additional will be deducted for the deception practiced upon all concerned, and for the loss of service and the numerous difficulties incurred, in case the fraud is not discovered until the vessel has got to sea. But still more than this, the rest of the crew consider it a fraud upon themselves, as they are thus deprived of a man of the class the vessel required, which makes her short-handed for the voyage, and increases the duty put upon themselves. If, for instance, the articles provide for 6 able seamen, the men expect as many, and if one of the 6 turns out not to be a seaman, and is put upon inferior work, the duties which would commonly be done by seamen will fall upon the 5. The difficulty is felt still more in the watches, as in the case I have supposed, there would be in one watch only 2 able seamen instead of 3, and if the delinquent was not a capable helmsman, the increased duty at the wheel alone would be of itself a serious evil. The officers also feel at liberty to punish a man who has so imposed upon all hands, and accordingly every kind of inferior and disagreeable duty is put upon him. And, as he finds no sympathy from the crew, his situation on board is made very unpleasant. Indeed, there is nothing a man can be guilty of, short of a felony, to which so little mercy is shown on board ship, for it is a deliberate act of deception, and one to which there is no temptation except the gain of a few dollars. The common saying that to hand reef and steer makes a sailor is a mistake. It is true that no man is a sailor until he can do these things, yet to ship for an able seaman he must, in addition to these, be a good workman upon rigging. The rigging of a ship requires constant mending, covering and working upon in a multitude of ways. And whenever any of the ropes or yards are chafing or wearing upon it, it must be protected by chafing gear. This chafing gear consists of worming, parceling, serving, rounding, etc., which requires a constant supply of small stuffs, such as foxes, sennet, spun yarn, marline, and the like, all which is made on board from condemned rigging and old junk. There is also a great deal of new rigging to be cut and fitted on board, which requires neat knots, splices, seizings, coverings, and turnings in. It is also frequently necessary to set up the rigging in one part of the vessel or another, in which case it must be seized or turned in afresh. It is upon labor of this kind that the crew is employed in the day's work, and jobs which are constantly carried forward on board. A man's skill in this work is the chief test of his seamanship, a competent knowledge of steering, reefing, furling, and the like being taken for granted, and being no more than is expected of an ordinary seaman. To put a marline spike in a man's hand and set him to work upon a piece of rigging is considered a fair trial of his qualities as an able seaman. There is, of course, a great deal of difference in the skill and neatness of the work of different men, but I believe I am safe in saying that no man will pass for an able seaman in a square-rigged vessel, who cannot make a long and short splice in a large rope, fit a block strap, pass seizings to lower rigging, and make the ordinary knots in a fair, workmanlike manner. This working upon rigging is the last thing to which a lad training up to the sea is put, and always supposes a competent acquaintance with all those kinds of work that are required of an ordinary seaman or boy. A seaman is generally expected to be able to sew upon a sail, and few men ship for seamen who cannot do it. Yet, if he is competent in other respects, no fault can be found with an able seaman for want of skill in sail-making. In allotting the jobs among the crew, reference is always had to a man's rate and capacity, and it is considered a decided imputation upon a man to put him upon inferior work. The most difficult jobs, and those requiring the neatest work, will be given to the older and more experienced among the seamen, and of this none will complain. But to single out an able seaman, and keep him at turning the spun-yarn winch, knotting yarns, or picking oakum, while there are boys on board, and other properly seaman's work going forward at the same time, would be looked upon as punishment, unless it were temporarily, or from necessity, or while other seamen were employed in the same manner. Also, in consideration of the superior grade of an able seaman, he is not required to sweep down the decks at night, slush the masts, etc., if there are boys on board and at hand. Not that a seaman is not obliged to do these things. There is no question but that he is, just as much as to do any other ship's work, and if there are no boys on board or at hand at the time, or from any other cause it is reasonably required of him, no good seaman would object, and it would be a refusal of duty to do so. Yet if an officer were deliberately, and without necessity for it, when there were boys about decks at the time, who could do the work as well, to order an able seaman to leave his work and sweep down the decks or slush a mast, it would be considered as punishment. In working ship, the able seamen are stationed variously, though for the most part upon the forecastle. At the main tack, or fore and main lower top and topsail braces, the light hands being placed at the cross-jack and fore and main topgallant and royal braces. In taking in and making sail, and in all things connected with the working of a ship, there is no duty which may not be required of an able seaman. Yet there are certain things requiring more skill or strength, to which he is always put, and others which are as invariably assigned to ordinary seamen and boys. In reefing, the men go out to the yard-arms, and the light hands stand in toward the slings, while in furling, the bunt and quarters belong to the able seamen, and the yard-arms to the boys. The light hands are expected to loose and furl the light sails, as royals, flying jib, and mizzen topgallant sail, and the men seldom go above the cross-trees, except to work upon the rigging, or to send a mast or yard up or down. The fore and main topgallant sails, and sometimes the flying jib of large vessels, require one or more able seamen for furling, but are loosed by light hands. In short, as to everything connected with working ship, making and taking in sail, etc., one general rule may be laid down. A seaman is obliged to obey the order of the master or officer, asking no questions and making no objection, whether the duty to which he is ordered be that which properly belongs to an able seaman or not. Yet as able seamen alone can do the more nice and difficult work, the light hands, in their turn, are expected to do that which requires less skill and strength. In the watch on deck at night, for instance, the able and ordinary seamen steer the ship, and are depended upon in case of any accident, or if heavy sails are to be taken in or set, or ropes to be knotted or spliced. And in consideration of this, if there is light work to be done, as coiling up rigging about decks, holding the log reel, loosing or furling a light sail, or the like, the boys are expected to do it, and should properly be called upon by the officer, unless from some circumstance it should be necessary to call upon a man. Yet, as I have said before, if ordered, the seaman must do the thing, under any circumstances, and a refusal would be a refusal of his duty. No man is entitled to the rate or wages of an able seaman who is not a good helmsman. There is always a difference in a ship's company as to this duty, some men being more steady, careful, and expert helmsmen than others, and the best quality cannot be required of every able seaman. Yet, if upon fair trial, in bad weather, a man is found incapable of steering the ship, under circumstances not extraordinary, he would be considered by all on board to have failed of his duty. It should be remembered, however, that there are times when the very best helmsman is hardly able to steer a ship, and if a vessel is out of trim or slow in her motions, no skill can keep her close to her course. An able seaman is also expected to do all the work necessary for reefing, furling, and setting sail, to be able to take a bunt or earing, to send yards and masts up and down, to rig in and out booms, to know how to reeve all the running rigging of a ship, and to steer or pull an oar in a boat. The standard of seamanship, however, is not so high in coasting vessels, and those of a smaller class bound upon short voyages, in which all the work that is necessary upon the vessel or rigging is usually done when in port by people hired from on shore. In such vessels, many men ship for able seamen, and are considered upon the whole competent, if they are able-bodied, and can hand, reef, and steer, who perhaps would only have shipped for ordinary seamen in vessels bound upon long voyages. In all large-class vessels, and in vessels of almost any class bound upon long voyages, the standard of seamanship is very nearly what I have before described.